Welcome to Hourglass Secrets. Imagine a child locked away in total darkness for 13 years, forbidden even to speak, punished for the slightest noise, and denied every touch, every human connection. A child who didn't know what the sky looked like, who had never felt the warmth of sunlight on her face, and who couldn't even form a word. This is not a story of myth or legend. It really happened. Her name was Genie Wiley, and the horrors she endured would later shock the world and challenge everything we thought we knew about the human mind. Her father, Clark Wiley, built a prison out of ordinary walls, turning his own daughter's life into a study of fear and control. For over a decade, Genie was strapped to a potty chair or locked in a crib-like cage. Each cry, each attempt to move, each flicker of curiosity was met with punishment. Her body grew weak, her muscles floppy, bones underdeveloped, her mind starved of language and touch. The world outside her small room became an alien concept, incomprehensible and terrifying. Yet even in this unimaginable darkness, her survival was a whisper of defiance. Psychologists later observed the astonishing paradox. Genie's instincts to survive were so strong, she learned, adapted, and clung to life despite years of systematic cruelty. But there was a cost. A body weakened, a mind fragmented, a soul shadowed by trauma. Every step toward life would be painful, and every moment of progress would reveal how profoundly human resilience could endure, and yet how fragile it truly is. Genie's story is a study in contrasts: horror and hope, silence and survival, terror and the spark of curiosity. She was a child who should never have lived fully, yet she did, hidden in shadows and isolation. The first time anyone outside her family would see her, the discovery was so shocking that experts across psychology, linguistics, and child welfare paused, awestruck. Here was a human being, robbed of childhood, whose brain bore the scars of darkness, yet whose tiny flickers of intelligence and awareness offered a glimpse into the astonishing power and tragic limits of human development. As we uncover Genie Wiley's journey, understand this: what you're about to hear will grip at your deepest fears and fascination. It is a story not only of abuse and cruelty, but of resilience, of scientific obsession, of ethical dilemmas, and of a child's indomitable will to survive against unimaginable odds. Genie's silence would speak volumes, revealing truths about humanity, morality, and the hidden consequences of cruelty. Before we continue, please hit subscribe and tell me, what state are you listening from? The world only learned of Genie Wiley because of a single, desperate act. On the morning of November 4, 1970, social workers arrived at the Wiley home in Los Angeles, responding to a call that would change history. They discovered a girl who seemed barely human, a child trapped in the body of a teenager, her mind frozen in the infancy of 12 years. The air in the house reeked of neglect, the furniture sparse, the walls silent witnesses to years of confinement and cruelty. Genie was 13, yet physically smaller than most 8-year-olds, her bones weak, her muscles soft and unformed. Every movement was labored, every glance cautious. What the social workers saw was more than physical deprivation. Genie's eyes darted, wide and terrified, scanning every shadow as if anticipating invisible threats. Her fingers clutched at her clothing and furniture, instinctively guarding herself. She had survived over a decade of utter isolation, forbidden to speak, forbidden to interact, punished for the smallest expression of curiosity or desire. Even now, she seemed to exist half in the present, half in a world that had been carefully denied her. Doctors and psychologists arrived immediately, drawn by the gravity of the case. For them, Genie was both a human being in need and a living puzzle of scientific fascination. Her silence was profound. She had no words, no structured language, only gestures and incoherent sounds to express basic needs. Yet her intelligence and awareness were unmistakable. She tracked movement with sharp eyes, responded to changes in her environment, and displayed curiosity in subtle, fleeting ways. Every new stimulus, a soft sound, a touch, the presence of another human, was met with a mixture of fear, hesitation, and tentative engagement. The rescue itself was not cinematic. There were no dramatic confrontations, no cinematic saving. It was methodical, cautious, and overwhelming. Genie was lifted from the confines of her room, guided through corridors, and taken to the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. She recoiled at every touch, every sound, but she survived. She had to. Because the alternative, returning to the darkness of her father's control, was unthinkable. Even as social workers celebrated the moment, a shadow of tension lingered. How could adults, however well-intentioned, ensure her safety while also respecting her fragile mind? How could they navigate between scientific observation and human compassion? The stakes were enormous. Every move, every interaction, carried the weight of 12 years of abuse. And yet, Genie's first tentative steps outside her room marked the beginning of something extraordinary. The slow reclamation of a life stolen, the first flickers of hope piercing through years of silence. By the end of that day, one truth was undeniable. Genie Wiley was no ordinary child. She was a survivor, a testament to human resilience, and a living challenge to the world's understanding of the mind, language, and trauma. But even in rescue, her story had only just begun, and the shadows of her past would follow her relentlessly. The first weeks after Genie Wiley's rescue were a delicate battlefield between fear and curiosity. The world outside her locked room was a cacophony of unimaginable stimuli. Voices, footsteps, sunlight spilling through windows, the subtle scent of food. Every sensation was foreign, and every moment demanded courage she had never been allowed to summon. Social workers and therapists approached her with painstaking patience, understanding that one wrong gesture could unravel the fragile threads of trust she was only beginning to weave. Physically, Genie's body told the story of years of deprivation. Her limbs were thin, underdeveloped, and weak, as if each muscle had forgotten its purpose. Her bones were fragile from lack of exercise, and her spine bore the subtle but permanent imprint of years confined to a potty chair or crib. Even sitting upright required effort, and the simplest movement, reaching for a cup or turning her head, could leave her trembling. Observers noted the paradox: a girl of 13 with the body of a child, yet a mind flickering with untapped awareness, alert and vigilant, ready to flee at the faintest threat. Language was the first frontier of discovery. Genie had no words, no grammar, only infantile sounds and gestures honed in isolation to demand food, water, or attention. Yet within these limited tools lay extraordinary potential. Therapists began teaching her the simplest associations: eat, drink, yes, no. Each success was monumental. When she managed to utter a word intentionally for the first time, the room seemed to hold its breath. It was more than communication. It was a reclaiming of agency, a faint whisper of autonomy after 12 years of enforced silence. Emotionally, Genie was a complex puzzle. At times, a gentle touch could provoke curiosity, a small smile, or even laughter. At other times, the slightest noise, a door closing, a sudden clap, could ignite panic, sending her flinching, freezing, or screaming, reliving punishments she could barely name. The smallest acts of kindness had to be carefully measured, offered in controlled doses, yet each successful connection was a triumph. A hand held tentatively, a glance lingering, a shared smile. These were battles won in a war that no child should have fought. The role of her foster family and therapists became crucial. They created a sanctuary where exploration was encouraged but never forced, where safety was absolute but never stifling. Toys, books, and ordinary objects became instruments of learning, conduits for curiosity, and as Genie tentatively reached for them, handed them back, or imitated the gestures of her caregivers, something remarkable emerged. the spark of social awareness, the first hints of emotional reciprocity, and the initial, fragile stirrings of trust. Even with these victories, the haunting presence of her father's cruelty lingered. Fear, hypervigilance, and the instinct to withdraw were embedded in every muscle, every reflex. Yet, against this backdrop of terror, Genie's resilience shone. Each small word, each tentative movement, each fleeting smile marked the slow reclamation of a stolen life. The audience could sense it. A girl who had been erased by cruelty was now quietly, insistently returning to the world, step by painstaking step. For Genie Wiley, the world beyond her locked room was both a marvel and a menace. Every new face, every shadowed corner, every sound carried the potential for terror or for connection. She had survived over a decade of isolation, but survival was only the first battle. Now, she faced the challenge of relearning what it meant to belong, to trust, to be seen as a child rather than an experiment. The earliest bonds were painstakingly small. Her foster family and therapists approached her with a deliberate restraint born of necessity. Too much contact could trigger panic. Too little, and she risked withdrawal into the only life she had ever known, one of silence, fear, and confinement. Each touch, each shared smile, each carefully guided hand became a negotiation between courage and instinct. When Genie hesitated to take a toy or return a gaze, it was not defiance. It was survival, ingrained over 13 years. And every moment she chose engagement over withdrawal was celebrated as a quiet revolution. Social awareness emerged like flickers of light in a long night. Genie began to observe others with intent, recognizing that gestures and expressions carried meaning beyond immediate needs. She watched children playing, adults conversing, and the simple rhythm of daily life. And slowly, the patterns began to register. When a caregiver smiled or offered a comforting hand, she began to mimic the gesture, testing the rules of human interaction that most children learn instinctively. Each tentative imitation was monumental, a bridge forming between a mind starved of connection and the social world she had been denied. Yet the shadows of her past loomed persistently. Loud noises, sudden movements, or even raised voices could transport her back to moments of punishment, triggering panic or withdrawal. Her reactions were unpredictable, a constant reminder that trauma does not vanish. With rescue. The world had become a labyrinth of possibility and peril, and every choice she made, whether to reach, to speak, to engage, carried weighty significance. Therapists documented every subtle flicker of recognition, every moment of eye contact, every tentative attempt at reciprocity, understanding that these small victories were evidence of profound psychological resilience. Trust, perhaps the most fragile of human constructs, had to be built from scratch. Her caregivers learned to read micro-expressions, to offer reassurance without intrusion, to celebrate curiosity without forcing action. A hand placed gently on her arm, a soft voice accompanying a meal, a shared laugh over a simple toy. Each gesture was a thread, weaving her back into the human tapestry she had been ripped from. And gradually, Genie began to respond. She initiated touch on her own, smiled at recognition, and in rare and precious moments, even offered the smallest gestures of empathy toward others. These interactions revealed more than progress. They revealed possibility. Beneath the layers of fear, hypervigilance, and instinctive withdrawal, there existed a child capable of joy, connection, and emotional resonance. And yet, the haunting question remained: how much of her humanity had been lost forever? Each bond formed was both a triumph and a reminder of the years stolen from her. The world outside her room was no longer a threat she could not comprehend. It was a test of resilience, a stage upon which she would reclaim her life, piece by delicate piece. Even after the doors were unlocked, Genie Wiley's life remained a battlefield. Rescue had ended her physical confinement, but it could not erase the shadows carved into her mind. Years of isolation had left permanent imprints, gaps in language, fragmented cognition, and a deep-seated fear of the world she had been forbidden to know. Conversations that others took for granted, exchanging ideas, joking, or sharing a story, were mountains she had to climb, each step laden with uncertainty and vulnerability. Yet, in these challenges, she revealed a truth both chilling and awe-inspiring. The human spirit, even when starved and broken, refuses to surrender. Her interactions with family were fragile and fraught with tension. Returning to her mother, Irene, was not the triumphant reunion one might imagine. Irene, herself scarred by years of manipulation and abuse under Clark Y, struggled to understand Genie's unique needs. Stability remained elusive, foster placements came and went, and every change risked unraveling the progress painstakingly achieved. Each upheaval rekindled the terror of abandonment that had been drilled into her for over a decade. The psychological toll was immense, a haunting reminder that survival is never synonymous with safety or peace. Physically, Genie remained vulnerable. Malnourishment and immobility during her formative years left her smaller, weaker, and uncoordinated. Simple tasks, walking long distances, climbing stairs, lifting objects, were exhausting, often painful, and reminders of the years her body had endured imprisonment. These limitations, combined with the cognitive and emotional scars, created a life where every accomplishment was monumental, yet shadowed by the knowledge of what had been lost. Despite this, Genie's story became a cornerstone of modern psychology, child welfare, and linguistics. Researchers, initially drawn by curiosity, documented her every milestone, every regression, every breakthrough. Her life offered rare insight into the brain's plasticity, the critical periods of language acquisition, and the devastating consequences of extreme neglect. Ethical debates raged over the boundaries of study versus human dignity, forcing society to confront the painful question, can curiosity ever justify intrusion into a fragile human life? Genie's existence became a silent testament to the consequences of neglect and the responsibilities of those entrusted with care. And yet, amid tragedy, there was hope. Genie's resilience, her tentative connections, and her small victories illuminated what remained possible for those who had been robbed of childhood. Her story is a warning and a guide, a reminder that human development is fragile, that trust must be nurtured, and that every child carries potential that can be extinguished or awakened by the world around them. Though Genie would never live a conventional life, her legacy persists. Every policy protecting children from abuse, every ethics review that prioritizes consent over curiosity, every social worker trained to recognize the subtle signs of cruelty carries her invisible signature. She was a child stolen by darkness, yet her life, her silence, and her survival continue to shape the way society understands trauma, humanity, and hope.